A white officer decides to arrest two black police captains, but the revenge of the two imprisoned captains is immediate. What happens when the line between justice and revenge becomes indistinct in a city where corruption and racism are intertwined? In a fictional small town in the United States, the lives of Marcus Hodge and Jamal Barnes, two black police captains, change radically when they are unexpectedly arrested by Kevin Hawthorne, an ambitious white officer. What seemed like a righteous action transforms into an emotional battlefield where the quest for justice can lead to devastating consequences. Marcus Hodge has always had a dream: to serve and protect his community, showing that it is possible to be an honest police officer in a world filled with injustices. He grew up facing racism, not only on the streets, but also within the police force itself. As a captain, he became a respected figure, a mentor to young black officers who looked up to his story of overcoming adversity. However, behind his strong facade, Marcus carries the traumas of a past marked by difficult decisions and a constant struggle against discrimination. The pressure on his shoulders is immense, and he finds himself in a hostile environment where his motivations are often questioned. Jamal Barnes, his colleague and friend, is younger and has a more aggressive view of just. For him, the police have always been an extension of his fight to protect his community. However, his impatience with bureaucracy and methods that border on illegality have made him an easy target for criticism. The arrest of the two captains is not just a personal matter for Jamal, but a direct attack on his belief that he can make a difference. Finding himself behind bars, he realizes that his struggle for justice may cost more than he imagined. Kevin Hawthorne, the white officer who arrests Marcus and Jamal, enters the scene with the ambition to clean up the police. He believes he is doing the right thing, but gradually finds himself surrounded by lies and manipulations. The pressure to follow orders from superiors and the lack of understanding of the racial and political dynamics of the city make him vulnerable. As the story progresses, Kevin begins to question his own actions and what it truly means to be a police officer. He finds himself torn between his convictions and the growing awareness that he may have been just a pawn in a much larger game. The arrest triggers a wave of protests and racial tensions that engulf the city. Friends and allies of Marcus and Jamal, who were once respected, now feel powerless and furious. The community unites in a clamor for justice as tensions rise and violence becomes a real possibility. The streets that were once full of life now transform into an emotional battleground, where every corner holds the pain and hope for change. As Kevin tries to unravel the truth behind the evidence against the captains, he discovers a world of corruption that challenges everything he believed. Documents and testimonies lead him to believe that Marcus and Jamal were about to expose a conspiracy within the police force, something that could shake the foundations of power. From there, he finds himself on a dangerous journey, where the line between right and wrong becomes increasingly blurred. As tensions rise, former colleagues of Marcus and Jamal, who have also been marginalized by the system, begin to devise a plan for revenge. The fight is not only for the captain's freedom, but to expose the true criminals hiding behind badges and uniforms. Meanwhile, Kevin finds himself immersed in a labyrinth of intrigues and betrayals, realizing that he must make a choice: align himself with the truth or continue being a pawn in a corrupt game. The fate of everyone is intertwined in a complex plot, where the quest for justice can transform into a voracious desire for revenge. And the question that lingers in the air is, how far would someone be willing to go to protect those they love and fight against a system that always seems one step ahead? As the city boiled with protests and racial tensions, Marcus Hodge and Jamal Barnes fought their own internal battles. The arrest had been a shock for both, but the consequences of their actions and the pursuit of justice began to shape their lives in ways they never imagined. Marcus felt trapped not only physically but emotionally. Accustomed to being a pillar of strength for his community, he now found himself isolated in a cold cell, surrounded by men who, like him, had faced injustices. The weight of betrayal and doubt haunted him. He wondered how he had reached this point, whether his efforts to change the police from within had been in vain. With each passing day, he felt his determination waning, and the line between the pursuit of justice and a desire for revenge began to blur in his mind. Outside, Jamal faced his own struggles. Frustration consumed him as he found himself surrounded by a sea of people clamoring for action. What had once been a fight for justice was now becoming a desperate quest for revenge. He remembered the nights he had patrolled the streets, always believing he could make a difference. Now he felt his faith was being tested. The pressure to act, to retaliate, grew with each passing day. In this tumultuous scenario, other characters began to stand out. Aisha, a young community activist, became a strong voice among the protesters. She was the sister of a childhood friend of Marcus and had grown up hearing stories about his achievements. Aisha saw Marcus as a symbol of hope and integrity in a corrupt system. Realizing that the two captains were unjustly imprisoned, she decided she could not remain idle. Her determination was fueled by anger and passion, but also by the pain of losing people she loved to police brutality. However, she was also facing the dilemma of radicalizing her actions in the pursuit of justice, or maintaining a peaceful path that could truly bring about lasting change. Another crucial character was Sergeant Rick Owens, a police veteran who had worked with Marcus and Jamal. He was a man of principles, but he also felt powerless in the face of the corruption that dominated the police force. Rick knew there was something much larger behind the arrest of the two captains, and his loyalty to them forced him to act, even if it meant challenging his superiors. However, his attempts to investigate the truth were constantly thwarted by veiled threats and pressure to remain silent. Rick found himself in a moral dilemma, torn between his safety and the need to expose the truth. As protests intensified, Marcus and Jamal began to realize that the battle was not only against the system, but also against themselves. Marcus, in his cell, reflected on his past decisions. He wondered if he had done enough to protect himself and his colleagues. Jamal, on the other hand, struggled to control his impulsiveness. He was determined not to let anger consume him, but with each passing day it became increasingly difficult. The situation became even more complicated when a new group began to form among the protesters, a radical group that believed the only way to bring about change was through violence. Aisha, who initially sought a peaceful approach, found herself torn between her belief in justice and the temptation to join these new allies. The pressure to act intensified, and she began to question whether peaceful methods were truly effective. This internal conflict led her to reflect on her own beliefs and how far she would be willing to go for justice. Meanwhile, Kevin Hawthorne, still grappling with his own guilt and ambition, began to realize that his actions had consequences. He had become a symbol of what was wrong with the system, but now he saw himself as a key player in a much larger struggle. With the weight of his decisions pressing on his shoulders, Kevin began to dig deeper, determined to uncover the truth behind the arrest of Marcus and Jamal. However, the more he dug, the more dangerous the path ahead became. Threats against him began to emerge, and he felt increasingly isolated. The conflict intensified, forcing each character to confront their fears, weaknesses, and beliefs. Marcus and Jamal faced the harsh reality that the fight for justice might not be a glorious journey, but a path filled with betrayals, doubts, and the need to redefine what it meant to be a law defender in a broken system. Aisha, Rick, and Kevin were also pushed to limits they never imagined reaching, each facing their own personal battles as the city became an emotional battlefield. The line between justice and vengeance was blurring, and every choice made could alter the course of their lives and the community forever. The rising tensions became palpable, and the question hanging in the air was whether they would find a way to true justice or be consumed by the quest for revenge. As protests intensified in the streets, the lives of each character intertwined in unexpected ways. Marcus, in his cell, felt the weight of loneliness. Each day he confronted the voices of his cellmates, who shared similar stories of injustice and despair. One of them, a man named Derek, had been imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. Derek's story resonated deeply with Marcus, reminding him that the fight for justice was not just personal, but a collective issue. This connection made Marcus rethink his role. He realized he needed to find a way to turn his pain into hope, not just for himself, but for those around him. Meanwhile, Jamal, outside, was becoming increasingly involved in the demonstrations. The pressure was on his shoulders, and the anger that had once been a source of motivation began to feel like a burden. He found himself struggling against his own impulses, trying to stay calm while his friends called for more radical actions. Aisha's words echoed in his mind. True change comes from peace, not violence. But as frustration grew, Jamal wondered how long he could resist the temptation to join those advocating for retaliation. Aisha, for her part, was at a turning point. Her determination to seek a peaceful solution was being tested. The new radical group that had emerged among the protesters attracted many young people, offering an outlet for the frustration and pain they felt. She watched with concern as some friends joined this movement, and the line separating justice from vengeance became increasingly thin. Aisha needed to find a way to unite the community around a common cause without letting anger consume them. However, with each passing day, her faith in peaceful change diminished, and she found herself increasingly surrounded by doubt. Sergeant Rick Owens, for his part, was becoming more aware that his position in the police did not protect him from the corrupt. He began to investigate on his own, reaching out to sources that could help him uncover the truth behind the arrest of Marcus and Jamal. However, every step he took seemed to bring more danger. He received anonymous threats, and the pressure from his superiors was increasing. Rick was in a dilemma. Should he remain silent and preserve his safety, or risk everything to expose the truth? Every night he questioned whether he was doing the right thing. Guilt consumed him, and he felt increasingly isolated, unsure of whom to turn to. Kevin Hawthorne, who had previously been driven by ambition, began to understand the depth of his choices. Guilt accompanied him, and he felt he needed to do something to correct his mistakes. While investigating the imprisonment of Marcus and Jamal, Kevin found information that could change everything. However, the deeper he delved, the more threats piled up. He felt as if he were in a dangerous game, where every move could be his last. The pressure mounted, and in his quest for redemption, he faced his own fragility. Loneliness consumed him, and doubt made him hesitate about what he really needed to do. The emotional tension among the characters grew. Marcus, while reflecting on his life and his mistakes, realized he needed to find a way to redeem himself, even while imprisoned. He began to communicate with his cellmates, sharing his experiences and inspiring them to fight for a better future. This new understanding of his leadership motivated him not to succumb to despair. Jamal, struggling to maintain his integrity, found himself in a critical situation when a close friend joined the radical group. The emotional betrayal hit him hard. He wanted to help, but Aisha's words kept echoing in his mind, making him hesitate. He began to realize that true strength was not in acting out of anger, but in keeping hope alive, even in the darkest situations. Aisha finally found the courage to face her own fears. She began to organize peaceful dialogues in the communities, trying to unite people around a common vision. However, she also faced resistance, and her determination was frequently tested. Every step toward peace seemed challenged by those yearning for revenge. Rick, for his part, decided he could no longer remain silent. He chose to expose the truths he had uncovered, even knowing it could cost him his career. The courage he found was reflected in his actions, and he became a voice within the system, trying to change things from the inside out. As the city became an emotional battleground, each character fought against their limitations and doubts. The pursuit of justice was far from clear, and the choices they made brought consequences that could change their lives forever. The road ahead was filled with uncertainties, but each of them began to realize that perhaps the true battle was finding the courage to confront themselves and to unite, even when everything around them seemed to crumble. As the city boiled with protests, an unexpected event emerged, altering the course of the lives of Marcus, Jamal, Aisha, Rick, and Kevin. On a rainy night, local news reported that a leaked video showed police brutality against peaceful protesters. The shocking images spread like wildfire, causing public outrage to explode even further. Marcus, in his cell, watched the news on the television in the detention center. He could not believe what he saw. The video showed the brutality with which the police dealt with the protesters, and he remembered everything he had heard about similar injustices. The pain he felt from being imprisoned now mixed with anger and hope. He realized that even behind bars, he could be a voice for those who could not defend themselves. The revelation of the video was a call for him to become a leader, not just for his cellmates, but also for the movement beating outside. This new perspective made Marcus reconsider his choices. He had felt powerless before, trapped in his own pain, but now he saw an opportunity to inspire others to fight for justice. The idea of being an agent of change, even in his situation, filled him with determination. He began to plan how he could communicate with the outside world, hoping his words would reach the protesters, showing them that their struggle was not alone. Outside, Jamal was also deeply affected by the video. The image of his friends being assaulted by the police fueled his anger, but at the same time he felt divided. The pressure to join the radical group was increasing, and his friend who had joined them was now calling for more aggressive actions. However, Jamal remembered Aisha's words and the peaceful fight she advocated. He knew that real change required more than just anger. This revelation forced him to confront his own shortcomings. He had hesitated before to take a stand, but now he knew he needed to be an example of peaceful resistance. Aisha, seeing the reactions of people to the video, felt a mix of despair and hope. People were mobilizing, but the path they chose worried her. She decided to intensify her efforts to promote peaceful dialogues. However, the pressure she felt was mounting as many of her friends were drifting away, choosing to join the radical group. The revelation that the fight for justice could turn into violence made Aisha reconsider her own beliefs. She questioned whether she was truly doing the right thing by insisting on a peaceful path while the world around her seemed to be crumbling. Rick, for his part, felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The video exposed not only police brutality, but also corruption within the system he worked for. He knew he needed to act, but the threats he had received kept him on high alert. The revelation of the video was a turning point for him. He realized he could no longer remain silent. The courage he found in deciding to expose the truth was now more necessary than ever. He found himself in a dilemma: to protect his own safety or risk everything to do the right thing. The internal struggle made him feel more isolated than ever. Kevin, who had previously sought only success and ambition, saw his vision of what was truly important change. The video confronted him with the reality of his past actions. He realized that by prioritizing his career, he had ignored the consequences of his decisions. Now, with information that could help Marcus and Jamal, his quest for redemption intensified. The revelation of the video forced him to reflect on what success really meant. He could not allow himself to be just a spectator while injustices occurred. The urgency to act pushed him to make riskier decisions, but ones that could finally bring him closer to who he truly wanted to be. The emotional tension among all the characters intensified. The video acted as a catalyst, uniting their struggles in a common cause, while also challenging their beliefs and choices. Each of them faced new challenges, forced to confront their shortcomings and reconsider what it meant to fight for justice. The city was on the brink of transformation, but what that would mean for each of them was still uncertain. The struggle for justice was far from simple, but now more than ever they realized that true strength lay in unity and the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. As the city boiled with protests, the consequences of the leaked video began to reverberate deeply in the lives of Marcus, Jamal, Aisha, Rick, and Kevin. Each of them faced the reality of their choices and the urgency to act in a critical moment. Marcus, still in his cell, felt the fire of determination grow within him. The images from the video echoed in his mind, and he began to write letters, trying to communicate with his friends and family on the outside. He knew that even while imprisoned, he could be a voice for those who were fighting. The words flowed from his pen with renewed passion. He spoke about the importance of peaceful resistance, reminding everyone that their struggle was not in vain. However, the reality of his situation weighed heavily on him. The loneliness of the bars and the fear of what could happen to his friends tormented him. He wondered if he could really make a difference, or if his words would merely be an echo in an indifferent world. Outside, Jamal grappled with the growing pressure from his friends to join the radical group. He felt torn, with a heavy heart. The anger he felt at police brutality propelled him, but Aisha's words resonated in his mind. He decided to attend one of the protests to see what was happening. When he arrived, he saw people united, shouting for justice, but he also saw the rising tension between the protesters and the police. The scene left him distressed. He remembered what Aisha always said about the importance of maintaining peace and dignity in the struggle. Jamal realized that if he let himself be carried away by anger, he could become part of the problem. He stepped away from the radical group, determined to be a voice for peace, even if it meant facing disapproval from his friends. Aisha, for her part, was in the midst of the storm. People were mobilizing, but many choosing violence left her troubled. She decided to organize a meeting at a community center, where she could gather people who believed in peaceful resistance. However, in doing so, she realized that many were drifting away from her, drawn to the promise of more radical actions. Loneliness enveloped her, and Aisha began to question if she was doing the right thing. During one of the meetings, she sat in a corner, listening to the heated voices, feeling like a stranger in her own struggle. But amid the chaos, a young woman approached her and said, "Aisha, I am here because you gave me hope. Don't give up." This statement ignited a flame within her. The fight for peace was difficult, but she was not alone. Aisha took a deep breath and decided to continue, even if it meant swimming against the current. Rick, observing the unfolding events, knew that the situation was becoming more dangerous. The pressure for him to align with the police was increasing, but the video had changed something inside him. He began to receive anonymous messages threatening his safety if he spoke out about the corruption he knew. However, the images of his friends being assaulted kept him awake at night. He decided he could no longer remain silent. He met with a group of journalists seeking information about police brutality. During the conversation, he felt a knot in his throat. Fear still accompanied him, but the urgency to tell the truth was greater. He realized that if he didn't speak out, he would be betraying not only himself but everyone fighting for justice. Kevin, on the other hand, was at a turning point in his life. He looked in the mirror and saw a man he did not recognize. The video confronted him with his own shortcomings and the superficiality of his ambitions. He decided he wanted to do something meaningful. At a corporate leadership meeting, he stood up and spoke about the importance of the company taking a stand against injustice. The silence that followed was deafening. Many looked at him with disdain, but he did not back down. What had once been solely about success was now about being part of the solution. The rejection he faced was painful, but he remembered Marcus, Jamal, and Aisha. They were fighting for a better world, and he wanted to be part of that. The consequences of the turning point were manifesting in each of them, challenging their beliefs and forcing them to confront new obstacles. The struggle for justice was not simple, and each step they took was a mix of hope and fear. But despite the difficulties, there was a new determination in their hearts. They realized that even amid pain, true strength lay in coming together and facing the truth, no matter how difficult it was. And so each of them, in their own way, began to forge a path that could change not only their lives, but also the future of the city. As the city boiled with protests, each of the protagonists faced their greatest challenges. They were in a moment of transformation, where pain and adversity became catalysts for personal growth. Marcus, inside his cell, found in words a way to connect with the outside world. Loneliness was his constant companion, but by writing letters, he began to rediscover himself. Through his reflections, he learned to trust himself more. The determination to be a voice for those fighting for justice ignited a new hope within him. He realized that even while imprisoned, he could inspire others not to give up. Through writing, Marcus not only expressed his pain, but also his strength. Thus, he began to see his situation not as an end, but as a new beginning. Each letter he sent became a step toward his own inner freedom. Outside, Jamal also faced an internal conflict. The pressure from his friends pushed him toward radicalism, but he remembered Aisha's words about the importance of maintaining peace. By choosing to distance himself from the radical group and participate in a peaceful protest, he began to rebuild his identity. Jamal learned that true strength did not lie in succumbing to anger, but in choosing peace amid chaos. He realized he could be a leader by promoting unity among people. Even if it meant going against the tide, this new understanding gave him a fresh perspective on the struggle for justice and his role in it. Now, he was not just a spectator, but an active participant seeking transformation through peace. Aisha, battling loneliness, found strength in the hope that her message brought to others. Although many sidelined her in search of more radical actions, the young woman who encouraged her to continue made Aisha reflect on her purpose. Instead of allowing herself to be disheartened, she decided to intensify her efforts. By organizing meetings and promoting dialogue, Aisha began to see the fruits of her persistence. She realized that she was planting seeds of change, even if the results were not immediate. The fight for peace was not easy, but the connection she established with people helped her overcome her insecurities. With each meeting, Aisha grew stronger and more confident, proving to herself that true change began within her. Rick, for his part, was at a crossroads. The pressure to align with the police left him conflicted, but the desire to tell the truth urged him to act. By meeting with journalists willing to expose police brutality, he finally began to break free from the fear that confined him. Rick realized that his voice was powerful, and that by speaking out, he not only helped others, but also helped himself heal. He learned that honesty and courage were more important than the safety he thought he had by remaining silent. This new perspective transformed him, allowing him to view his life in a more meaningful way. He was no longer just a spectator of injustice, but an agent of change. Kevin lastly had his own moment of epiphany. In a corporate meeting, while discussing the need for the company to take a stand against injustice, he faced rejection from his colleagues. The fear of losing his position and status was real, but he realized he was seeking something deeper than material wealth. Kevin understood that true success lay not in accumulating possessions, but in making a difference in people's lives. He began to apply the lessons he learned from his friends, deciding to engage in social causes. This transformation helped him forge new friendships with people who shared his vision. He felt more connected and part of something greater, and this new support network encouraged him to continue his journey. Thus, each of them, facing their internal and external challenges, began to pain and struggle united them, and together they learned that true strength resided in unity and the determination to fight for justice. With each step, they discovered that their stories were intertwined and that even amid difficulties, there was always the possibility for growth and overcoming. The lessons they learned along the way not only changed their lives, but also ignited hope in a city that burned for change. Marcus felt the pressure mounting in his cell. The messages he received from Jamal, Aisha, Rick and Kevin inspired him, but uncertainty consumed him. He was about to stand trial, and the weight of injustice felt crushing. Looking through the small window, he saw the city bustling with activity. The protests were at their peak, and the struggle for freedom and justice echoed in the streets. It was a decisive moment, not only for him, but for all those who, like him, sought change. Meanwhile, outside, Jamal was preparing to speak at a protest. He had chosen to be the voice of peace, and this was his chance to show that it was possible to fight without violence. With his heart racing, he addressed the crowd. Aisha's words echoed in his mind. The true strength lies in unity. He stepped up to the makeshift stage and, with a determined look, began to speak. He shared his story of how anger almost led him down an irreversible path, but how choosing peace had set him free. He urged everyone to unite in a cry for justice, but with compassion, not hatred. The crowd began to respond, and a sense of hope began to spread. Aisha was among the protesters, feeling the vibrant energy around her. She had finally found her place, and Jamal's determination inspired her even more. With a group of young people, she started distributing flyers about the importance of dialogue and understanding. They were there to show that change began with small actions. Seeing the crowd respond, Aisha realized that her struggle was not in vain. Every smile and every word of support strengthened her. Rick, on the other hand, was in a nearby cafe, ready to meet with journalists who had shown interest in his story. He felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. He had decided that he would not be intimidated by anyone. With the courage he had cultivated, he shared his experience, the pain of witnessing injustice up close, and the need to expose the truth. The words flowed like a river, and he felt that he was finally breaking the chains that had trapped him. He was a bridge between what was happening in the streets and what needed to be heard. Kevin, in a video conference with his colleagues, faced a dilemma. He had an important presentation to make, where he should advocate for the company's engagement in social causes. The pressure to maintain his status and the company's image weighed heavily on his shoulders. But at that moment, he remembered everything he had learned from his friends. He took a deep breath and decided to be true to himself. Instead of just talking about profit, he addressed the company's social responsibility. True success, he said firmly, lies in making a difference in people's lives, not just in accumulating wealth. The reaction was mixed, but looking into his colleagues' eyes, he saw some beginning to understand. The climax of the story was approaching. The city was on fire, not just with protests, but with a new awareness. Marcus, in his cell, felt he needed to do something. With a pen and paper, he wrote one last letter, not just to his friends, but to everyone fighting for freedom. He wrote about the importance of not losing hope and of uniting in a single cry for justice. He sealed the letter, and with the help of a guard who had shown understanding, he managed to get it to the outside world. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Jamal, Aisha, Rick, and Kevin were all present, ready to support Marcus. He entered the room and, looking at them, filled his heart with strength. With the words of his letter echoing in his mind, he spoke. He not only defended himself, but also everyone who had suffered unjustly. He shared his vision of a future where justice and peace coexisted. The tension in the room was palpable, but Marcus's words resonated. He was not there merely as a defendant, but as a symbol of resistance. The judge, moved by the sincerity and strength of the words echoing outside the courtroom, decided to grant Marcus parole. What could have been a tragic ending transformed into a moment of victory. Tears of joy streamed down Aisha, Jamal, Rick, and Kevin's faces. They hugged, feeling that together they had faced not only individual challenges, but the collective struggle for change. The city, still boiling with protests, now had a new hope. The friendship they had formed, forged in adversity, was the greatest victory of all. Each of them had found their strength, and together they were ready to face whatever came next. After the trial, Marcus left the courthouse with trembling legs but a light heart. The sunlight hit his face, and he could hardly believe he was free. Looking at his friends, he saw the joy on their faces was contagious. They approached him, and Aisha was the first to hug him. "You did it, Marcus. You gave us hope," she said, tears in her eyes. Jamal, always the pacifist, looked at him with admiration. "Your words touched not only us, but everyone who was there. You are a true inspiration." Jamal's smile was wide and the energy between them was palpable. Rick, with a sparkle in his eyes, added, "Now we have a chance to change things and you are a part of it." As they walked together through the bustling streets, Marcus felt a mix of happiness and responsibility. He knew his freedom was not just a personal victory, but a step toward something greater. The voices of the crowd echoed in his ears, and he realized he was now in a position to help shape the narrative. "We need to keep fighting," he said, looking at his friends. "This victory is not the end, it is just the beginning." Kevin, who had watched everything from his own perspective, felt a change within himself. Marcus's courage inspired him to act more, not just in his professional life but also in his community. "Let's organize something. An event, a meeting, something that brings people together and makes us heard," he suggested. The idea quickly gained traction among the group, and soon they were all discussing plans. In the days that followed, the city continued to boil. The protests did not cease, but now there was a new spark of hope. Marcus decided he needed to get actively involved. With the help of his friends, he began attending community meetings, sharing his story, and encouraging others to speak out as well. He realized that every voice mattered, and that together they could create a powerful movement. Aisha became an event organizer, creating safe spaces for people to express themselves. She realized that there was a huge need for dialogue and understanding. "People need to listen to each other," she often said. And so, with everyone's support, they managed to gather a crowd for an event promoting peace and justice. Marcus's words, "True strength lies in unity," became the movement's motto. He was there, standing and looking at the crowd that had gathered to listen. The energy and determination vibrating in the air were indescribable. He felt that he was finally making the difference he had always wanted. As all this was happening, Marcus also reflected on his journey. He thought about how pain and injustice had transformed him. In a conversation with Rick, he said that he had never imagined that going through all this could take him to such a beautiful place. He learned that every battle is an opportunity to grow and connect with others. Rick, always the observer, replied that he had become a voice for many, something no one could take away from him. There was a mutual respect between them that was now palpable. They were friends, allies, and above all companions in the fight for justice. Weeks went by, and the movement began to gain media attention. The courage and determination of Marcus and his friends were inspiring people in other cities. He started receiving messages of support from people he had never met, making him realize that a network of solidarity was forming. But not everything was easy. There were days when the pressure felt unbearable, and Marcus wondered if he could truly make a difference. One night, while reflecting in his room, he decided it was time to open up to his friends. Sometimes he felt that the weight of responsibility was too much. What if they failed? Aisha, always optimistic, replied that they were not alone. They were together, and that was what mattered. Every step they took was a victory, no matter the size. With that, Marcus felt a wave of comfort. He knew that regardless of the difficulties, they would continue to fight for a fairer world. The freedom he had gained was not just his, but for all who believed in change. And so together they moved forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead, united by hope and the struggle. Marcus looked at the crowd that had gathered around him, their eyes shining with determination and hope. This was the culmination of months of struggle, difficult dialogues, and deep connections. He had faced not only the system but also his own insecurities. Throughout his journey, he learned that true success was not just the freedom he had achieved, but how that freedom could be used to impact the lives of others. The message of unity and solidarity that he and his friends spread echoed in every corner of the city. People began to unite to fight for their own causes, inspired by Marcus's courage. He realized that by sharing his story, he had given voice to many who felt silenced. This transformation was not just his, but that of an entire community that now felt empowered. However, the journey was not without challenges. The pressure increased, and there were days when Marcus felt overwhelmed. Doubts still haunted him, but he had learned to view his struggles as opportunities for growth. In an act of vulnerability, he decided to share these feelings with his friends. Aisha's response, always optimistic, made him realize that true strength lay in friendship and unity. They were not just allies in the fight, but a family. As media coverage grew, so did criticism and attacks. Marcus knew that the battle was far from over, but he was more determined than ever. He channeled his frustration and sadness into concrete actions, organizing events that promoted dialogue and understanding. The small spark of hope he had ignited transformed into a fire that lit up the city. Amid this transformation, Marcus remembered that revenge was not just an act of retaliation, but a way to rewrite his story. He decided that the best way to repay the injustices he had suffered was to continue fighting for those still trapped in their own battles. Instead of seeking revenge against his oppressors, he chose to turn pain into power and pain into a call to action for everyone around him. With each event they held, each voice that was heard, he felt he was rising again. The revenge he sought was more than just a response to his wounds. It was the transformation of an entire community. He became a symbol of resistance, and the city began to change. People started to believe that change was possible, and that was the true victory. Reflecting on his journey, Marcus realized that the friendship and support of his friends were fundamental to his transformation. They were not just companions in the struggle, but a network of love and solidarity that supported him in his darkest moments. He learned that life is a journey of ups and downs, and that every failure was an opportunity for a fresh start. Now, looking to the future, Marcus felt ready for any challenge. The wisdom he had gained throughout his journey was invaluable. He had not only conquered his fears, but had also become a leader. True strength lies in unity, he repeated to himself, a mantra that now resonated in his heart. He invites you to reflect on your own experiences. How have you faced your challenges? Share your stories in the comments and help create a space of support and inspiration. Together we can be the change we wish to see in the world. If you felt touched by this journey, like and subscribe to the channel.